Throughout Ukraine, sandbags are being placed around statues, stained glass in churches is being boarded up, and precious artifacts are being moved to safer locations. While Russia's war against Ukraine is now mainly concentrated in the country's eastern region, historical buildings and other sites of cultural significance have become another front in the war. Indiscriminate attacks throughout Ukraine have damaged or destroyed hundreds of cultural sites by some counts. And in Ukrainian areas recently occupied by Russia, experts say another kind of cultural destruction is taking place, with attempts by Russia to exert greater political and economic influence in the areas. Together with our partners at Bellingcat, Newsy has analyzed 3 incidents in which Ukrainian cultural sites were damaged or destroyed during the Russian invasion, something that, if done intentionally, could constitute a war crime. In the lead-up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, President Vladimir Putin gave a speech to the Russian nation. In it, he denied that Ukraine was ever a real independent nation.
Важно понимать то, что Украина, по сути, никогда не имела устойчивой традиции своей подлинной государственности.
That caused concern for many in Ukraine and internationally over what this meant for Ukraine's culture and heritage were Russia to invade. This includes Olesia Ostrovska-Liuta, the director of the Art Arsenal Cultural Center in Kyiv.
You clearly see that there is a plan to erase Ukrainian identity, Ukrainian culture, if needed, together with Ukrainians physically, to get rid of anything which makes Ukrainian otherness from Russia.
While it's difficult to assign intent, the sheer number of Ukraine's cultural sites that have been damaged or destroyed, from museums dedicated to Enlightenment-era philosophers to 16th century monasteries, shows that they are at the very least not being excluded from Russia's indiscriminate bombing of Ukraine's population. Working with Bellingcat and using open source information, we identified multiple sites which were heavily damaged by either airstrikes, artillery fire, or small arms fire. Each was in the territory controlled by Ukraine's government at the time it was attacked. There are many more cases than just these. On the evening of March 12th, the historic Sviatohirsk Lavra Monastery was struck with what witnesses say was an airstrike.
По Свято-Успенской Святогорской лавре был нанесен авиационный удар. Бомба упала непосредственно рядом возле моста, который соединяет.
Video from the evening and the next day show that the monastery's buildings, nearest to a bridge spanning the Donetsk River that connects to the monastery, received the most damage. Images and videos shared by the monastery show that the windows in buildings as far away as 270 meters were damaged by the blast. The monastery is hundreds of years old and considered a major Orthodox Christian religious site in Ukraine. At the time it was bombed, more than 500 refugees from other parts of Ukraine were staying in its buildings. The monastery says that there was no military equipment on the complex grounds. While witnesses say the damage was the result of an airstrike, there's no weapon remnants or craters visible in the imagery online, so it's difficult to verify the claim. A group of pine trees near where the majority of the damage was caused are missing their tops and appear to be burned, suggesting that the trees may have detonated whatever munition was used. A month after the attack, a Russian general said on state-run media that Ukrainian forces had placed weapon systems in the region of the monastery, though there's no evidence to back up this claim. More religious buildings associated with the monastery were shelled 2 months later in May. Another cultural site was damaged 10 days later, on March 23rd, in the besieged city of Mariupol. The Quinji Art Museum, dedicated to Ukrainian Greek artist Arkhip Quinji, known for his realist paintings, was destroyed by a Russian bomb, according to the Mariupol City Council. Planet satellite imagery shows that the museum building, while damaged, was not completely razed. A month later, Russian news channels conducted interviews from the Quinji Museum and showed at least one piece of Quinji's art, apparently hidden by the director. A handwritten sign on the front door declared the museum was now controlled by pro-Russian separatists. Damage to the museum consists primarily of a large hole seen in the side of the building, as well as the majority of the building's roof being destroyed. The Grigory Skovoroda National Literary Memorial Museum, located about 40 kilometers outside of Kharkiv, was destroyed the night of May 7th. Video showed the museum, which is at the historic home of the 18th century Ukrainian poet and philosopher, on fire late in the evening. State emergency services for the region were able to put the fire out, but not before the building was severely damaged. According to witnesses as well as Ukraine's national police in the Kharkiv region, the fire started after the museum was hit with a Russian artillery strike. One security guard was injured in the attack, and the museum's deputy director for research said on Facebook that part of the exhibits that were on display were taken out of the building before the strike. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky referenced the museum attack in an evening address.
Прицільні ракетні удари по музеях – це навіть не кожен терорист додумається. Але ось така армія воює проти нас.
These kinds of attacks aren't the only threats to Ukraine's cultural heritage. There's another type of cultural erasure that comes from the building of Russian-themed monuments in occupied territory, or even by switching the local currency to Russia's ruble. A paper published in the Small Wars Journal in January, before the invasion, found dozens of examples where new monuments were constructed on the Crimean Peninsula and separatist-controlled Donbas region in eastern Ukraine since 2014, when the conflict between Russia and Ukraine began. This gives a glimpse of what may be in store in newly occupied regions of Ukraine. In fact, it's already starting to happen in the occupied Kherson region, which Russia is trying to switch to using Russia's currency over Ukraine's. Statues of Vladimir Lenin and Soviet flags are also starting to appear in cities under control of Russian forces as well. Ukraine has thousands of cultural sites. Getting an exact number is difficult due to differing definitions of what actually constitutes a site of heritage or culture. One count, from the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative, puts the number at more than 28,000. Using that metric means there's a lot of potential for sites to be damaged. Ukraine's Ministry of Culture is keeping count of how many cultural heritage sites have been damaged or destroyed. So far, they've counted more than 300 incidents.